everyone. I'm here with Shannon. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Shannon is a dear colleague and friend and student and co-conspirer in all things somatic and care for the body. Shannon is a somatic dietitian. To learn more about her, I'm going to link another interview that I did with her last year. But Shannon, would you like to tell us just a couple of words about yourself? And then we're going to step into the topic of motivation and what happens in the beginning of the new year.
Yeah, so I am a dietitian who I completed my somatic stuff about, I guess it was last year. And I really help people look at where their intersection of trauma and food behaviors relates and helping them to look at choices that they're making and kind of the why. Some have also been looking at like how their choices may create more dysregulation in the body, um, but really kind of supporting finding regulation with food, finding regulation with uh, the central nervous system, and then how they're able to kind of combine those two together to have a more supported relationship with food and body.
That's beautiful. There's a few of you out there in the world who are combining being a dietitian or nutritionist and somatic work. You come from the somatic experiencing world. I have a couple of people that I know you've met in my community who come from different somatic studies. And it's always so unique to see that these two worlds have always belonged together.
Okay.
And somehow, in order to study them, we separated them.
Mhm.
And it reminds me of how in early anatomy they used to like cut up the body to study the parts. And then we discovered fascia. And I feel like in some way, the nervous system, just like the fascial system, is like this great connector. And what's it like to have like neurodietetics or, neuronutrition or somatic dietetics? It's very exciting where you and other colleagues are taking this world.
Yeah, it's been such a game changer in the work, so it's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's a game changer and it's a joy to have you here. So I emailed you in the beginning of January because what I was sensing is from our community, people who are currently enrolled in the foundations program, who are learning how to organize their system, people who are in the graduate program, and then kind of satellite people who maybe follow me on social media or connected through my newsletter and my book. All of a sudden I started getting all these emails and requests for sessions and people going, it's January and I feel all this pressure to do something about my eating and to put some order in there. And I know that I'm working on organizing my nervous system and I know eventually things will get easier, but maybe there's someone in my family who's doing something and I feel the pressure from a partner or from a sister or like my colleagues are having a challenge at work. And how do I balance the pressure that's coming from the outside with my own rhythm and with my own pace? And it was essentially like a lot of like cries for help. And so that's when I reached out to you and thought it might be really beneficial to have a little conversation about when people come to you as a dietitian, how can we use the nervous system as a compass to see where the impulse for action is coming from, how clarity turns into action, and perhaps you and I can help people recognize throughout our conversation where they are on their nervous system map and whether they're in a place of right relationship with self and right action and an impulse that matches their energy, or maybe they're not. So tell us a little bit about that. What do you notice is the trend in January as a dietitian?
Yeah, well, like kind of like you and I talking earlier, how the trend is to kind of button up, quote unquote, and to get more uh oh, I'm using a lot of air quotes, healthier with food behaviors, more with exercise. I mean, I think there's so much we're culturally just inundated with. January is a time for change, new year, new you. It's like I think people tend to feel more of that pressure. And I think too, especially women, we tend to be more in that fawning, like it's kind of like that pleasing piece that comes in of like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I think that part is a lot of my clients that are coming in to see me, it's like, how do we hold the space that you're not pleasing, that it's like that capacity to tolerate, like here's a stressor, and if capacity is my ability to metabolize stress, like here is a stressor. And likely if we've been this chronic dieter, there's the trauma of like, I'm going to be super restrictive and then it doesn't work. And I'm rinse repeating. Like, I think there's some of the trauma response that comes on during the new year. So I think that there's a lot of factors in play, and the getting more centered in like, how am I focusing on what's best for self, even though environment is telling me it's not, right? Like it's the invitation is to come in and do what's best for you versus what environment is doing. Because I think once you kind of realize how how much the environment is not good, like I think there's can be like, I kind of talk about like when I was doing intuitive eating and doing all the training, like and teaching some of that to my clients, like there's a period of anger, like it's like
Mm.
being mad about, oh my gosh, this is everywhere, right? And so when we're coming up with New Year's and then these people are like, why I'm not doing it anymore, why are they still doing it? Like I think we get all these emotions that are very dysregulating to the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is so important to share that we are social beings and we're always getting pinged by the environment and by the tribal behaviors in what is accepted. And being attuned with what's right for self requires spaciousness and requires that the system is not exhausted or hyper aroused. And I think January is this unique moment where people have just come off of, so we have October, November, December. So we have 3 months of in the northern hemisphere of days that are getting shorter. End of December is the shortest day, the longest night, and colder for most of us. And the natural cycle is for the system to begin to dwindle, just like your yard starts to wither and the juices in the trees start to retreat and the leaves fall. The same in the human body, there's an inward movement of the energy. And so we have less of a budget, and the body goes more towards conservation, including storing maybe a little bit for the winter subcutaneously so that we can be prevented from losing heat. And our social calendar and our biological natural calendar go opposite of each other. And so what happens is everybody's really busy with school. You're a parent, and I'm sure that you experience this very differently than I do. My stepkids are grown now, but it's like the school calendar is so busy in the fall. The work calendar, that last quarter, is where we usually push to meet any goal we couldn't meet
Yeah.
throughout the year. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, I'm behind 20% of my financial goal. I won't be able to do this with my taxes. Let me push. And then there's the holidays that are scheduled, and all the caffeine, all the pumpkin spice latte special, like wafting from every corner, and all the holiday foods that we are cued for comfort and socialization through, which is wonderful. Food has a beautiful social role, but all the food is actually stimulating and arousing us more. And so I wonder what you think about that, this kind of mismatch between biological, natural calendar and our social calendar that leaves
Yeah.
us in a state.
Well, yeah. And I think too, like just the emotional components that come with holidays. I think that, right, there's all that familial stuff that gets kicked up. And so I think that part is a big piece with kind of looking at like the way that it has been pushed in our society is that it's, this reset. It's like you can just push all that away, right? Like, because I think a lot of people are coming into January carrying all that. And to your point of like just the winter where it is that we're naturally supposed to gain a little bit more and pull a little bit more, like that's demonized in our culture. Like that's literally like what every gym is like, don't fall privy to that. Like so again, like I think there's that piece of the pleasing, like I'm supposed to do what they tell me because this is what I used to follow, that there's that rub of this like that doesn't fall in line, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that I think that it is where obviously summer, spring, we're more active, we're out, like it fits more of we're going to do more. And I think that there's just such a mind screw in the way our culture has been and how it doesn't match with the natural rhythm of our body. And but I feel like that's American culture, especially for women, right? It's not really matching what our natural states are.
Yeah, and then it's very interesting because then when we can't fall in line with that, like you said, I love that expression. It's like then you have seasonal affective disorder. It's like it's a disorder
Right.
that you cannot be a flower that blooms all year round.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out like getting a blue light and like flashing yourself in the face at 5 a.m.
Yes.
To like, you know, arouse yourself so that you can be dancing to the beat of culture as opposed to dancing to the beat of nature. And I was just speaking to someone this morning about like winter and spending time mostly in your neighborhood. Like I come from a culture that still has kind of like some tribal habits in it that I grew up in. And so like you really spend winter with your closest neighbors. And there's a lot of sitting and a lot of crafting, like a lot of fine motor movements and enjoying what you harvested in the summer. And the foods, like especially like in Bulgaria, there's a lot of like dried cured meats, a lot of pickled vegetables. And so like November, December, January through February is eating a lot of this like preserved meats and lots of fermented food and a lot of just sitting around, like not doing
Yeah.
much. There's like so much snow, like you're gonna go to the neighbors and then get some of their cheese and come back to your own house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's not a lot of this like we're out skiing and we're out climbing and we're gonna be in Aspen for 2 weeks and we're gonna fly to a tropical country for 2 weeks and like we're gonna dive there and then we're gonna come. It's like there's no natural ability to yield and to be in a state or we can be renourished. And not having little kids at home and being able to have my own schedule, I take the last 2 weeks of the year off. And so I might work on some creative projects. But one of the things that I do is like really noticing, am I hungry? Am I sleepy? Do I want a bath? Do I want to go for a walk? And there might be days in December that I don't leave the house for like 2 days or 3 days. And I'm not like running on my treadmill inside the house. I really don't
Right.
leave the house and I just
Yeah.
rest. And it's something that I've allowed myself to do as somebody who's able to do that in my family life. And it's like, wow, what was I doing before?
Yeah.
What was I
Well, I
doing
think
before?
you and I have had this talk, but it's like when you're no longer in the hustle, right? Like it's as you've termed it, like living on rocket fuel. Like I think once you've given yourself the gift of, I don't have to do this,
Yeah.
and you see the natural rhythm of like, my body actually wants to not move or just move real slow.
Yeah.
If I'm trusting in that, right? Like I kind of term it as like you will have a voice that will come up and be like, "Are you sure you should do this? Like this doesn't seem right. This is not what we're supposed to do." Right? Like that part, that diety part, or the part that followed all the rules. Like we know where this leads. Like this leads to why we're here, right? Like why we sought the class or why we're listening to this. Like there's a reason, right? So it's in the trusting of like, what if I listen to this natural rhythm? What if I
Mhm.
am just softer and calmer and just more easeful in this time because it's what my body wants to do. The same happens like as the flowers are blooming and there's more light, there's more energy. There's more, I want to move more. I want to be more, moving more, doing like I just have more energy. It's just this natural state. I'm coming out of hibernation.
Yeah.
But there's such a shift to get to that place. But the more in sync, like I found this true for myself, the more in sync I am with myself, I just want a lot of rest. I want a lot of eat. I don't really want to do all of that, right? And I think that's scary for a lot of people who have been chronic dieters, chronic New Year's resolution people. Like it's that, and we're inundated because even though when we're in those early stages, we're changing, society's not. It's still in the multi-billion-dollar industry of buy it in,
Yeah,
buy in.
right, right. I really appreciate you saying that there's like an inertia to the culture, and whether it's inner or outer. But if we bring it down to the fractal level, it's actually our own accommodation, or if we use a different word, addiction to intensity.
Mhm.
That if I am living in a system that's constantly in hyperarousal, it is so noisy in there that I can't really hear my own rhythm and my own impulses towards nourishment or rest or nourishing activity. Or if I've been in high arousal for long enough, or I have a particular history that I might actually be so hypo-aroused, I might be so lethargic and shut down that's I actually don't get the impulse to go out and move, or I don't feel drawn to a certain food, or I might use foods as stimulants as opposed to nourishment. And then that's where trauma comes in, and a somatic dietitian like you can like see it from Google Earth. You can see it
Yeah.
like really clearly.
Yeah.
You can see from a neighboring planet, like, oh wow, the way this person is speaking to me in their consultation, their urgency, the pressure they're under, I can see they have lived in high arousal, which is not an optimal zone of arousal for nourishment, most of their life. Or the way that they're coming in their collapse and droopy eyelids and hopelessness, helplessness, despair, um, even like given up hope that anything can change. Oh, that person's, oh, it's really hard to take action when you're collapsed. And so I think so often what's happening in the culture, it's in the culture, but it has a resonance inside with the cycles, the high arousal or hyperarousal cycles that are already running. And on the fractal level, it just kind of dings you. And maybe I'm always hyper aroused after the holidays because there's all these boundaries I didn't put with my family, or even though I put them, they got broken anyways, because
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. And now I'm left carrying the load of the arousal and I have no place to discharge it. How much better to go and do a bunch of Tabatas in a gym
Oh, yeah.
until I, sprain my ankle, or go to like an extreme cleanse that's going to keep me and is going to feed that high arousal. Or if I'm really lethargic and just can gather myself together, what better than somebody brings me structure from the outside because I don't have my own. And so with this low body budget and the habits of the nervous system, I think it's so crucial that people begin to recognize, am I making this decision from high arousal? Am I making this decision from hypoarousal? Or am I here? I have plenty of energy. I feel really resourced. And looking at my blood work and looking at what happened the last 3 months, all right, my thyroid might need a little support from
Yep.
my naturopath, and I might actually need to do this with my food because
Yep.
I can't keep running on chocolate chip cookies and skim milk. Like that's just not nourishing me in a way
Yep.
that my endocrine system needs.
Yep. Yeah. It's such this shift of what's supportive. Like that's the word I always use of what's supportive to your body. And that's, when we look at all these rules that come in, or the complete shutdown where it's like, screw it, I'm not doing anything. Like there's always a cost. There's a cost no matter what. So
Yeah.
and I think it takes time for someone to realize, I know it did for me, to realize like, how is your system running? Like, do you tend to be more hypo? How are you coming in? Are you coming in more hypo aroused? Are you coming in more hypo? Like when you're in it, it's kind of really hard to be like, oh, this is just how I am. And so I think these little snapshots of like, oh, but this feels more different and this feels so much better. How do I get more of this? Like, I think that part is a big piece And then when you are faced with, let's say, more health stuff, that you are able to do that in a much more compassionate, supportive way, that's best for also your system.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think it's so complex with health conditions
Mhm.
because where a lot of us go is into self-blame, like what did I do to cause this? Because it keeps us in a world where we still have some control.
Mhm.
Whereas if it's like I did all the things and this still happened is really scary. Like I
Yeah.
have no control is very scary. So we'll usually go to self-blame or self-rejection or shaming ourselves. I know how much shame I have endured in my health conditions, especially as somebody who's in the world of health.
Mhm.
And everybody's like, especially when close people find out and they'll go, but you're the healthiest person we know. It's like, and as if as if
Right.
as if that's a guarantee for anything. And like what is health in the end of the day? It's like a hard thing to even like determine what is health, because we see somebody who might be on the cover of a magazine and the culturally accepted body who has like really disturbed relationships at home. Is that person healthy? I don't know, like who's to say? So it's a very personal expression of the blueprint of what health is for one person versus another. But I feel like there's this sense of, oh, I feel all these emotions about how I am. And if I can only go into a diet cycle and go and do something about it, that temporarily becomes a strategy to put on the back burner all these terrible feelings that I don't have any support to address.
Yeah, I think, when people come see me, I'm very clear that like I'm not the average dietitian. Like I will not set up a meal plan for you. We'll for sure talk about food and how it's going to regulate you, but it is this piece of like, how am I starting to connect more emotion with my eating or not eating or exercise? Like understanding what might be some of the intolerable and how are we building more capacity. And then looking at the way that when we are supportive with body and regulating blood sugar and eating foods that do nourish our body, when I'm doing that from a place of support, how different that feels than I may be eating those same foods when I was in a place of dieting, right? Like it's some of that unblending of these foods. Like I just saw a client today that was some of what our work was. Is I can't go back to eating like the vegetables and all that because I'm going back to that. And it's like, how do we work with this part, right? Like this, the unblending of I can eat vegetables and it doesn't mean I'm going back to my eating disorder. It's
Right.
how am I eating that to support, right? Like that's important work because we live in the culture of all or nothing. And so
Yeah.
it's finding this middle that is support.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think it's really important to bring right language into
Yeah.
how we address these things that are autonomic and like they're organic and it's supposed to just happen on their own. So you've been through my program and we've talked about interoceptive decision making, like this very spontaneous, easy, intuitive decision making that arises from the core, that up the vagus comes this insight as you are walking by. Like I was just at Trader Joe's this morning and it's like I'm walking by the kiwis. I haven't had a kiwi in probably 5 years. Like it's
Mhm.
not my favorite fruit in the world. There's a bunch of other things I'd rather eat than the little seedy things that get stuck between your teeth. And as I'm walking by the kiwi, my mouth is watering. Something inside of me goes like it's just like a wild animal that's like walking in the woods and there's like I'm hungry and there's a bird over there and my ears
Yeah.
go right.
Yeah.
So we have that resonance inside that it's like every food has like a little energetic barcode and your body's going as if you walk slowly enough in the
Yes.
supermarket and if you're not starving, because if you're
Yeah.
starving everything
Yeah.
goes right.
Yep.
And so something in me goes kiwis. Oh, okay. So they go in my basket. I'm gonna see what happens to them later. Maybe they're just gonna be for decoration. Maybe I'm gonna want to eat them. I don't know. I find them very, very interesting. They're super fuzzy and fun. but something in us knows, and that's that interoceptive decision making.
Yep.
I also, at Trader Joe's this morning, wanted to get some chimichurri sauce and picked it up and saw that there's an ingredient in there that my body, like I get stomachache from that ingredient. So then I get to make another decision. Oh, I really want the chimichurri, but it's got this, gives me a stomachache. Let me put that back and see if they have this in a jar that might not have this ingredient that gives me a stomachache. So we can engage all of our brains, our gut brain, our heart brain, our prefrontal cortex to make these decisions. But when there's been trauma and the system is overwhelmed, everything in the supermarket might feel like, I don't even know where I am. I don't know what these things are. I don't know how to make a decision. And I've read the book that says, legumes are bad. And I've read the book
Yep.
that says dairy is bad. And then now I'm with this person who says beans are good, but the other person says beans are bad. And so we get confused, and so that confusion makes us feel incompetent in our own bodies. And I wonder if there's something that you, as a conclusion, might want to say to people about perhaps how you work with retrusting the body, like coming back into a more trusting relationship with the interoceptive system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of a lot of people's work is the trusting. That was the biggest piece of why I chose to do this somatic work, is because as an intuitive eating dietitian, that was people's trauma that was mixing them up as far as I can't trust this. So I think there's a piece of, listening. How do you know when it is a yes? Like where it's like, I want my body to have this. And is the charge around permission? Is it because I've been told I'm not supposed to have permission to have this? Like that's some of like, I kind of look at helping people work on in this similar fashion of the kind of like when you're saying like each food has a resonance. Most of the food that people feel like they can't have, we kind of talk about like each food has a charge. Like if I'm working with these lower charged foods and giving myself the permission to have them and paying attention to, well, how does my body do with this? Do I really like it? Do I even like it if I'm eating it from a place of permission? Like it's this re-engagement with it. I feel like that part does help to trust more the intuition, because if it's more neutral, if there's less of this like, oh my gosh, I'm totally going to binge on it, and it's more of like, I could kind of take it or leave it, but now I'm actually like with it, I can trust whether I really like it, whether it feels supportive or whether it gives me the stomach ache or I don't feel as good after. Like, and I'm experiencing it versus I'm not doing it because the book told me to do it or because so and so told me not to do it. Right. Like that part is such an integral part. I kind of call it's like going to like relationship counseling with food of like, I need to interact with you differently and I got to show up with you differently. So let me get to know you. Right. Like but I got to give you space. You got to be part of it. Right. Like I can't just keep pushing you out because I don't interact with you well. Like I think that part's such an important piece in that healing, to be able to see that it's actually inside of us. That wisdom is actually there.
That's beautiful. It's a great way to finish our conversation and kind of temporarily put a bow on it, because I want to talk to you like 50,000 more times. But there's a way in which it is there, and it's very much like the sky is there when there's clouds, like that, like old Buddhist metaphor. And if the clouds can just part for a nanosecond. I was working with someone recently that had this moment in a supermarket after not having eaten a particular food for a very long time, and all of a sudden this craving came and they were able to go get the food and prepare it, and they were so satisfied. And it was like that, like, let's sit with that feeling of satisfaction, let's marinate in it, let's draw it, let's task an object in your house to be like the holder of this feeling. Every time you pass by that object, reminding yourself that you had that experience. So you've seen that there's blue sky up there, you can't unsee it, and yet you might get cloudy again, and that's fine. This is what living in a human body is like. There's no just sunny skies all the time. You will go visit your mother-in-law, and it's gonna mess up your appetite. It's okay. You hopefully don't have to live with her.
Right.
But we can come in and out of resonance. And when you are deep in grief, this is not the time for you to be shopping. It's the time for the person who knows your favorite soup to cook it for you and bring it to you. And learning how to be in relationship with food and how to be in relationship with others who are offering care through food, I think is a great, great kind of horizon for those of us who are in recovery or who are entering recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I
Oh,
appreciate this conversation so much.
I always love talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. And for everyone listening, I will put a link to Shannon's website, and perhaps you feel the impulse to connect with her and maybe do some beautiful work to bring nourishment into your life with somebody who's so well trained and so compassionately available. And we'll have more conversations in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.